Hi, welcome to our ongoing discussion on fiction. If you can quickly recall, in the last class we introduced fiction and we defined fiction, and we said how fiction, the birth of fiction is concomitant with the birth of or the rise of the middle class or the rise of industrialization, and of course renewed importance attached to science and all those factors. All right. So, in this class we are going to discuss important components of fiction. In other words, what are those features that constitute fiction? We have understood fiction as a genre of literature, as a broad genre of literature, and how it is different from poetry. And of course, the rise of novel as such. Of course, we also discussed, compared to poetry and drama, novel or fiction is of recent origin. Let's say towards the end of 17th century or beginning of 18th century. And in this class, we are going to discuss components or elements of fiction. How do you write fiction? In fact, this class helps us not just in realizing those elements that constitute fiction. Of course, the fundamental purpose is to discuss them. If some of you are aspiring to be writers, or if you nurture ambitions of writing a novel, a conscious awareness of these elements, it's definitely going to help you in extraordinary ways. So, in other words, though the explicit purpose of this class is to make you aware of different elements of fiction, when you say fiction, we have already discussed this, right? It's a novel, a short story, a fable, anecdote, all of them come under fiction. All right. So, an active awareness of the elements that constitute fiction is definitely desirable for any student of literature. And this class goes a step ahead and also helps you in realizing your dream of becoming an aspiring writer once when you go through these elements of fiction. Okay, let's begin our discussion of elements of fiction in a detailed manner. Of course, if you can again quickly recall, we discussed how fiction has two meanings to it, and one is the meaning of as a genre, distinct genre of literature, how it constitutes a certain sensibility, and on the other hand, fiction also means something that is concocted. All right. So, we discussed how fiction is a kind of a lie. Nevertheless, you reach through the lie. Where you reach through the lie is towards truth. Truth is the ultimate destination of fiction, though it sounds a bit paradoxical. How it is true, we discussed in the last class. So, here you have some brilliant lines dealing with that. Now, look at this. This is what Albert Camus says, very well known existentialist Albert Camus. Fiction is a lie through which we tell the truth, right? That's true, because the purpose of fiction, though of course we concoct a whole world around it, when you decipher through that world of concocted world, when you decipher through or when you go through that concocted world, where it leads you is towards understanding the human nature, it leads you towards understanding the nature of truth, and therefore Albert Camus calls it a kind of fiction is a lie through which we tell the truth. And of course, see how a similar sentiment is expressed a little differently by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Of course, you can quickly recall what we discussed on Emerson during our class on American poetry. So, he says fiction reveals truth than reality obscures. It's true that reality tries to obscure truth in very many ways, because there are a lot of distractions here. There are a lot of impediments for us to realize truth, whereas in the world of fiction, because of the beautiful way it's been structured, and because of the very object purpose with which it's been designed, finding truth there in fiction becomes comparatively easier. That's why Ralph Waldo Emerson says it. And look at how Stephen King, a contemporary novelist, expresses a similar sentiment. Fiction is the truth inside the lie. Okay? So, if you can compare fiction to a fruit, now it is a metaphor, of course, you are familiar with metaphor. If fiction is a fruit, then the kernel of it is truth, or if the pulp, if fiction is a fruit, then lie is a pulp, and then the kernel or the seed in that is truth. So, that is how you can visualize fiction. And Margaret Atwood, a very well known writer, renowned feminist writer as well, defines fiction writing, and she compares fiction to science, because the purpose of science and fiction, they have similar objectives. What is it? They start with the question, what if, and how does it all work? Because if at the core of science is an inquisitive mind, at the core of writing fiction is also a similar curious mind. It wants to explore things. That is why she compares writing fiction to exploring in science. Okay? Yeah. Let us quickly go through different elements of fiction. That is the purpose of the class, right? Then you may wonder, where have we come at? Is it some kind of a deviation? Not really a deviation, but of course a necessary deviation, you can call it. Now, before we come to different elements of fiction, here is a very short story. Here is probably one of the shortest short stories that you may have come across. Please read it, and let us see if you can consciously come to terms with the different elements that are present in this short story. Of course, remember, when we say fiction, simultaneously we are discussing novel, short stories, novellas or short novels, fables and anecdotes, and all of them. The structural principle is same for a novel and a short story. Of course, if there is any change between them, definitely there is a change. The change is only in scale and magnitude. Okay? The change is only scale in magnitude. Otherwise, the governing principle concerning short story is the same as that of novel. Okay? So, look at this beautiful short story taken from Aesop's fable, The Vixen and the Lioness. A vixen, mother of 5 cubs, sneered at a lioness because she never bore more than 1 cub. Only one, the lioness replied, but a lion. But a lion. Now, look at this short story, and as I said, the principles are similar. So, what do you look at it? The moment it opens, you have Vixen, Mrs. Fox, you can call it. So, it can be a character, right? And then you have Lioness. So, therefore, this story revolves around the 2 characters, the Vixen and the Lioness. And there is a dialogue, there is a story in this, right? So, story, and there is also a small plot here, and there is a climax, a turning point, and all of them. Okay? So, keep the short story in mind, and then when we discuss various elements of fiction, let us see if you can spot those various elements of fiction even in this short story. Okay? True, it has characters. Well, of course, there is a setting which is not explicit. These are various elements of fiction. We are discussing that in a very short while. But look at it, there is the setting is slightly missing. However, it is implied here, or it goes, characters play a very important role. Therefore, setting becomes slightly not very relevant. Nevertheless, it presents a plot, there is an element of style, and of course, there is a moral towards the end of it. All those things are there even in this one of the shortest short stories that you have come across. Please remember this. Okay? Here comes different elements of fiction. Now, beginning with plot, of course, there is it's not that it has to begin with plot. That's the reason why we have presented in a circular way, because in a circle every point is a beginning and every point is an ending. In other words, there is no proper beginning, there is no proper ending. Every point is a beginning and ending. That's the reason why you can read them in any order. So, plot is one element. Plot is basically, of course, we are going to have a detailed discussion on all of that in the subsequent slides, but for our cursory understanding, plot is a story plus the causal factor. Story is what happens to whom and when, and then plot comes when you add the factor why does it happen. There is a cause to that, there is an effect to that. If there is an effect, it must have been caused by something else. That causal factor is there. So, therefore, plot is a combination of what happens to whom, why and when. In general, that's plot. Then you have characters. Characters play a very important role. If you can recall, characters are equivalent to people in the real world, like you and me. They are in the world of fiction, characters are people. People, animals, anything that the fiction makes use of in order to push its story, in order to push its plot, that's the character. Then there is conflict. Usually every fiction will have a conflict. It needs to have a conflict. Now, other words, in the absence of a conflict, then what happens? It becomes dull, dry and boring. Therefore, it needs to have an element of conflict, and that acts as a kind of a dynamo, that acts as an imperative for the plot to push and move in different directions. That's conflict. Conflict pushes the plot story in different directions. And then there is setting. Setting is the background, the context in which this entire story unfolds, the plot unfolds. And there is theme. Theme is not summary. Theme is, like, you can call it the intrinsic value. What is the value? Because when you read an entire novel or when you read a short story, there is an implied meaning. Maybe the writer may have constructed a whole narrative in order to convey that meaning. Sometimes it happens consciously, and sometimes when you create a universe, obviously the universe ascribes to itself a certain meaning. It's possible for us to detect certain meanings. Therefore, theme is the implicit motive, implicit value system present there and things like that. And then you have point of view. That becomes very, very important, right? Point of view is, in fact, that's the narrative strategy. That's who is narrating this entire tale, because ultimately when a tale is presented, when a story unfolds, somebody should narrate it. Either one of the characters in the novel or somebody from outside the world describing as if the person can see what is happening inside this fictional world, and then he or she can start unfolding the narrative. So, from whose perspective the entire thing is happening, that's point of view. Then there is a tone, what is the overall tone, and then what is the style, because style and tone, it relates to the overall structure of this fiction. What is the implied tone here? Is it one of attached? Is it one of detached? Is it one of anger? Is it one of sarcasm? What is that? It becomes evident when you spot the tone. And style is the signature style of the writer, because each writer has his or her unique signature style. So, that is revealed through the choice of language, through the use of metaphors, through the use of known locales and all that. So, that's concerning style. So, these are, broadly speaking, different elements of fiction. Now, you may ask, are they fixed? Not really, because when you search for elements of fiction, it may vary somewhere between 5 and 10. It may vary, some people may prescribe 5 elements, some people may even mention 6 elements, 7 elements, 8 elements, but generally speaking, plot, character, setting, theme, point of view, they are very, very important. And conflict, tone and style, sometimes conflict is also there, but sometimes it's part of the plot. In other words, these are the various elements that you find depending on whether you want to club one with the other or not. That is how you want to look at it. Now that you are familiar with various elements of fiction, now quickly recall the previous slide and see whether you can spot how many of these elements, if you can spot all of these elements or at least some of these elements in that short story. Do you think there is a plot? Obviously, anything that has a story will have a plot, therefore, you can find story and plot implicit there. Yeah, some people also consider story as separate from plot, that is another element of fiction, but here we are treating it together. Of course, when we come to discussing plot, we are going to discuss the subtle differences that exist between the two. All right. Yeah, of course, the story has a plot, and of course, there are characters. We identified the characters as the Lioness and the Vixen. There is a conflict. In fact, the conflict is caused by the taunt that the Vixen uses, the sneering, that she does. So, there is a conflict and there is a theme. And what is the theme? And the setting is slightly implied. Maybe you can consider it as a forest, because now Vixen and Lioness, they are in the forest, so there is an implied setting there. Okay. And what is the theme there? The theme becomes evident when you know that it's not the quality that matters, but the quantity. At the end of the day, though it is not very explicit, when the Lioness firmly says, she has only one cub, it is the lion cub, it's not the fox cub, it's the lion cub. So, probably what is implied here is quality over quantity. And point of view, of course, it's been narrated from as a third person narrative. We are going to discuss that in a short while. And of course, tone is very simple, style is also quite elegant. So, these are various elements of fiction you find even in that small fable. Though it is let us say as small as 3 lines or just 2 lines, you still find most of these elements inherently present there. You may not have realized it. See, when you read that, you may have simply taken let us say 30-35 seconds to read that particular sentence. Nevertheless, without your actually realizing, you will have spotted, your subconscious mind would have spotted various elements there. So, what you already know indirectly, we are going to know consciously. We are trying to make you a little more aware of these elements of fiction, so that when you construct a narrative, because remember, narrative is not something that you see in a novel, okay, or in a short story. When you go late and your boss is angry with you, of course, that is when you start weaving a short narrative around why you are late. That too is that is why we said, when you lie, and in order to justify that lie, you go on lining up lies after lies, what you are doing is you are creating fiction. That is why fiction also has the meaning of a lie. Or in a courtroom, when a lawyer is arguing, when he or she builds a narrative around his or her case, even there all these things are there, okay, but they operate in a different context. Nevertheless, elements of fiction is what you find there. Okay. Now, let us go ahead and pick up one more very short story. It is called Muddy Road. It is an old Japanese short story, and you may also see it in you may have come across this short story in Zen stories and other places. Generally, it is attributed to 18th century, but we do not know. Maybe it is a later conversion from the oral tale into a written form, but in its written form we can trace it somewhere towards the end of 18th century or 19th century. Again, that is not very important. What is important is the short story. Now, take a look at it. Again, a very short story, though not as short as the Vixen and the Lioness, nevertheless a very short story. Okay. Just take a look at it, read it, and see if you can now spot the various elements of fiction that you have understood here. Do you think you can see this here? Two monks, Tanzen and Ikido, were once travelling together down a muddy road. There are two monks, Tanzan and Aikido. They were travelling together down a muddy road. A heavy rain was still falling, so you can consider that as some kind of a setting. Coming around a bend, they met a lovely girl in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross the intersection. "Come on, girl," said Tanzan at once. Lifting her in his arms, he carried her over the mud. Aikido did not speak again until that night when they reached a lodging temple. Then he no longer could restrain himself. "We monks don't go near females," he told Tanzan, "especially not young and lovely ones. It's dangerous. Why did you do that?" "I left the girl there," said Tanzan. "Are you still carrying her?" "I left the girl back there. Are you still carrying her?" This is the short story, right? See if you can spot the various elements. Well, if you want to solve it a little more leisurely, then you can pause this video for a while and then see what are the characters, what is the plot, what is the setting, and since it's a little more chiseled short story, you will be able to find all that, what is the style, what is the moral, what is the theme of it, what is the tone, what is the conflict. You will be able to trace all that. So you can pause it and then chalk out all the details and then check your answer with what we are going to show it here. Okay, so that's an option we have. Now let's discuss the various elements. Okay, the muddy road. What is the plot in this short story? The plot is simple. There are two monks, Tanzan and Aikido. They are traveling down a muddy road and then they come across a young girl who is unable to cross a bend. Okay, and then Tanzan lifts her up and helps her in crossing the intersection. As a result, Aikido is very unhappy. He feels that it is against the vow that they have taken, because as monks they are not supposed to go closer to women or something like that, So therefore, he confronts Tanzan later and Tanzan explains Aikido that he left the girl long ago, whereas Aikido is still carrying her in his mind. That's as simple as the story and the plot. Now, what are the characters here? Obviously, you have two characters and there is one character who doesn't have much of a role, a young girl who is a kind of a mute character here. Tanzan and Aikido are the two characters. You've identified that, right? And now what is the setting here? They are journeying down a muddy road and there is heavy rainfall, there is heavy rainfall and there is a bend. That's the background, Setting is, in other words, the background to the story. When it happens, where it happens, all these things form setting, that's the setting. What is the conflict here? The conflict is this, that Aikido feels Tanzan violated the code of the so-called monkhood. Therefore, he is not very happy. Though the conflict is not dramatic, it is felt. The heaviness is felt during the remaining part of the journey because they are quiet, they haven't exchanged anything. That's what becomes evident, right? That's the conflict. Now, what is the point of view? Well, the point of view is who narrates it. There is a third person, as if somebody is watching all that is happening here in this particular scene. He or she is watching, a narrator, a third person narrator, and they can also go through what is happening in these minds. Therefore, they are presenting it to you. Okay, they are presenting it to you. Somebody who can see the entire thing. So here the narration does not happen through either Aikido or Tanzan. Somebody who is watching it presents it as if, as if somebody is watching it from above, presents it. This kind of narration is called a third person narration. What is the style? You can see in terms, style refers to the use of language, use of diction, It's a simple story, a very simple story, but narrates a very profound truth, very great truth, and therefore the diction is also very simple. I do not think there is any word that you are not familiar with here, therefore you can call it a very simple diction, right. And then what is the tone? The tone is very casual because it is not elevated, and sharp because when the tone refers to the tone of the characters here, and therefore you can consider the tone as very sharp. Even when Aikido remarks it, it is quite sharp, and when Tanzan responds to him, it is quite a sharp tone, and unassuming and informal. It is a very informal setting, informal tone. And what is the theme here? The theme is the mental barrier, the burden, Well, Tanzan may have carried the physical burden of touching the girl and then helping her carry it, whereas Aikido is still carrying the mental burden of that, even for quite some time. And moreover, it talks about the great philosophy. What is it? That of detachment. Detachment is, ability to develop a kind of mental distance between what you do and then thinking about it, right. Acting because action was required, then leaving the result to above, that is what our Bhagavad Gita also says, right. Believe in your action, but leave its fate to me, leave its results to me. So Tanzan found the girl in trouble, therefore he helped her, and then he forgot her there and is walking, whereas Aikido, who thinks he is following the religion, the so-called principles of monkhood, is not actually following, because the primary principle of monkhood is ability to develop that kind of detachment, whereas he may not have physically touched the girl, whereas he is still carrying the girl in his mind. So the story, in a beautiful, remarkable and short span, in its short structure, reveals all these philosophical truths. So these are the various elements. If you learn to do this, then automatically or intuitively you have understood the various elements of fiction, all right. So these are some things that we have to keep in mind. That is the reason why I began this lecture with some short stories, so that you intuitively can grasp what is otherwise a matter of theoretical debate or discussion. Nevertheless, since it is a formal course on literature, we can't avoid discussing the theory. Therefore, in the next class, we are going to take up these various elements of fiction in a little more detailed manner, and see, when we come to plot, what are the different elements of plot, if there is any structure to know the plot. When it comes to discussing characters, are they just all characters, are they of one type, or are they several types of characters, is there any variation in the characters as such. And when it comes to setting, what exactly is a setting? All these things we are going to discuss in the next class, all right. So, but remember the short story, remember these elements, and it becomes easier for us to continue our discussion there, all right. See you in the next class.